All makers are artists in how they live their lives and how they move through this world. But not all artists become professional art makers. Julie Oakes knew from childhood that she wanted to be a professional artist, and she took the path to make that happen. Please join me as I go visit Julie in her gallery, which is also her home that she shares with her partner, Richard. I'm Carrie McLeod. Welcome to The Makers. Hi, Julie.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, thanks.
It's good to see you
Good
again.
to see you too.
Yeah. I'm really excited to spend some time with you.
Good.
This is beautiful. So, what show is hanging right now?
It's the Brazil show. We were in Brazil last September and October, so all of this is what we brought back with us from Brazil.
Oh, you brought it all with you.
I've always been a creative person. I was the one that when we were in elementary school was doing the Christmas mural and doing the Halloween mural. I've always loved painting and making things. Used to make puppet shows downstairs. My family was very supportive, but we also had in our house, and I had a little brother as well, who he ended up becoming an architect. So my father was a doctor of music. So we had a house that had a lot of culture within it. And my parents were part of a club where you could order prints from various different contemporary artists. So we had a print of a Picasso print in our living room of a woman crying. And I think that was probably quite informed me as a younger person in terms of the fact that art wasn't, necessarily just landscapes, that it was a part of a whole culture with a group of people around it and everything as well. Mm-hmm. When I was between grade 11 and grade 12, I went to the Banff School of Fine Arts. Okay. So I was away from home for that amount of time with the André Stegeman and Françoise André were the teachers. They were both fairly well-known American artists. And I've always been interested in the life of an artist, almost as much as making art. So the idea, I would read books on the left bank in Paris and the community that was happening with all of the artists that were hanging out there. Right from the get-go wanted to live the life of an artist. Then finishing high school, I went to the University of Manitoba and took fine arts for 4 years. 3 years within the institution, and in the fourth year I dropped out, but still was within my programs, and once again lived the life of an artist in downtown Winnipeg with my own studio. And then after that it was a time when the Canada Council was maybe in their first year or their second year, they were actually going around and visiting artists' studios instead of having to submit things to them for a grant. And I got one of their first grants. And with that grant, I went to Europe and was able to come in contact with the great collections. From there, went to Greece, and from Greece, ended up going overland to India. So I was away at that particular time for 2 whole years. We very much believed in the idea of happenings and of your life being an artwork as well. So that carried through what it was that I was doing. And in India, in Nepal actually, I had the initial Canada Council grant renewed, and I proposed to the Canada Council that for a renewal of this grant, I would do a happening that would cover thousands of miles and reach thousands of people, which was essentially doing sort of a performance all the way back overland once again to Britain.
And what did you do?
Well, I bought a Jeep, and that Jeep we had decorated with 2 other artists as well, a guitar player and a printmaker, and we were going to be doing performances that would incorporate the music and the visual arts. It actually, we never ended up doing it because our Jeep broke down at the border. I mean, it was really much back in the day, so.
Okay, so you just didn't end up doing it, but you just continued.
I went back to London, England, and actually the man that was the guitar player that was traveling with me, when we got back to England, he ended up being in Eric Clapton's band. Oh, wow. And I ended up going to the Tibetan Center in Scotland, where I studied under Sherab Pauldon Beru, who was the court Tonka painter from Lhasa before they were expelled from Lhasa. So that's, I think, probably where I was also influenced in terms of my love of detail and form and order within the work that I do. I've always had the feeling that I believe that art should be provocative but positive, positively provocative. So, and I've also had a feeling of a responsibility towards a community, not only a community of younger people younger than myself, but also to a community where you are able to talk to the community. You're not, scolding, or you're not being didactic, but instead I always wanted my art to have a sense of generosity to it. Mm-hmm. So, although it might be a little off kilter, it usually has underneath it a basis of fun. In London, I was at the Tibetan Center. At the Tibetan Center, the way that worked was that if you were staying there for a long period of time, as I was studying under Sherab Pauldon Beru, you had to have a job there. So my job at the Tibetan Center was I was the cook, but also I was to establish a weaving studio at the Tibetan Center. So I researched looms and had a loom built by a Scottish man that lived nearby, and we went up to Edinburgh and got wools, various different wools, and set up a weaving section at the Tibetan Center. I was doing a form of Tibetan discipline that was quite rigorous, 100,000 prostrations and 100,000 repetitions of the 100-syllable mantra, all with the idea of having some kind of a breakthrough in terms of understanding of life, and always working, still painting. I did a very large mural for them there that still is at the Tibetan Center in Scotland. And then at the end met someone who had a home in Wales, and went to the home in Wales, lived there for a while, still with a Tibetan practice, still with doing a lot of visual work, and then ultimately in the end came back to Canada. And in coming back to Canada, I did the 5th year education degree in order to get a teaching degree on top of my Bachelor of Fine Arts. And that was at the University of British Columbia. And with such artists as Gordon Smith was my printmaking teacher. There was a lot of it was, because it was geared towards teaching, was about fabric fabrics and textiles, and led me into some of the knowledge of crafts that I have, now because of that degree. And then when I was there, and very much part of a community there as well, sort of the artistic community, and there was a group of people who did pleasure fairs, and the pleasure fairs were essentially large hippie fairs with music and culture and artists with booths, and connected with that group of people, and through that group of people ended up meeting the man that was to be my husband, Christopher Oakes. And then we moved here to Vernon. I think it was 1976 or 77. And it was at the time when the caravan was parked down below, it was parked at Fintry, and we bought a portion of land up above Fintry, which was a part of the Fintry High Farm. So that was when I first met Nick Hutchinson, when I first met Donna Dennison, and a lot of the people that were forming the arts community here. No, there was a quite a vital art community, big part because of the caravan being here, and also there were more sort of craft-oriented artists here. Bob Kingsmill, I went to university with Bob Kingsmill. Oh, wow. We were both at the University of Manitoba together. So he was one of the first people that I knew here in the valley. That's what we called our farm, the High Farm. It was a good hour in and out of Vernon, and kids went in on the school bus, but we would have a lot of people out on the weekends, and working my studio. I built a studio there by myself. There's a lot of time working by yourself, of course, as an artist. And so it was nice to be able to do things like work on the caravan productions, because it was a chance of having more of a sense of living with a lot of different other people as well.
Building something together.
Yeah, building something together, exactly, instead of just being your solitary producer. I think that it's different now, and that they will find a way through all of their connectivity and technology that still utilizes creativity. I think that there is such a thing as visual knowledge, and I think that visual knowledge will always be important to human beings, and especially, of course, to artists, because you're working within a visual realm and trying to find a very specific form of visual knowledge. So I actually have great hopes for the younger people. My granddaughter lives at the High Farm. Her mother and her dad that's still where they're living, and she is 12 years old, and she's on chapter 20 of a novel she's writing.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I think that creativity and the youth coming up, I believe, are in good hands. And I believe in our institutions. I think that that's where they, just as when I was younger and I had the chance of being able to work at the Regina Art Gallery, that our institutions are incredibly important for inspiring people coming up.
Definitely.
And also with here, and having my studio and having Headbones Gallery, one of the mandates or the precepts of this gallery is inclusivity. Doesn't mean that it's not curated or that there's a certain level of excellence or commitment that we veer towards when we're showing work. But in terms of people coming in and being able to see what's being done, we're always trying to foster that. And that's why we have the dinners. That's why we have the openings that we do, or the music nights, or the concerts. Like if you go into a New York gallery, you could quite often almost be frosted out just by who's at the desks, because it's so It's just, a lot of it, of course, is based on wealth. And I think that's another nice thing about art, is that if you are super passionate about art, and if you are doing it for your whole life, you can't help but be somewhat obsessive about it and as an area of interest. Making, really being successful monetarily is secondhand. What's more important is to try for some kind of truth.
Yes.
Which is perhaps unrealistic idealism, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, I'm a great believer. I'm a walking example of what it's like to live that art life, and I would say for younger people, it will work out okay. It's not necessarily important to have to line up where you're going to fit within a society, that there is room for everybody, and that what you have to bring forward could be very valuable. By the same fact, if you're not really wanting to do it, you have to really want to do it. You can be a doctor, and you can know that if you go through and get all of your qualifications to become a medical doctor, that at the end you will be able to practice what it is that you do and make a living. But being an artist is not like that. There's no clear path through, and there's lots of different paths being discovered now.
True.
The younger people are finding different ways of being able to survive as artists. And it's not even necessarily within the traditional disciplines of painting and drawing and sculptures. There's all sorts of other ways that they can, especially with technology, link up to, being creative and engaging with their creativity with society without necessarily having to fall within boundaried areas. I remember when I was younger, there was one of my professors would say, you can't call yourself an artist until, you truly are an artist and you're recognized as an artist, et cetera, et cetera. And just realizing at one point that actually that wasn't so. That if you are, that's what you are. By the way, I still really believe in institutional learning for younger people, institutional learning, and in other words, going to art schools and being able to have the equipment and the expertise at hand to be able to further what your vision might be of art, and also traveling, because to see what's being done in other parts of the world and how other people have, continue a practice is, I think, there's a wealth of information out there that has to be palpably realized, not so much just on the screen or through Google, but to be, actually standing in front of some of those pieces or experiencing some of the interactive pieces. I think I grew in two different ways. I think one was when I opened Headbones Gallery in Vernon. Up until that time, I was always at the High Farm in my studio doing what I did for my people. Mm-hmm. But once I opened the gallery in Vernon, then there were people coming in who hadn't seen art before, and I realized that there was the possibility and a responsibility perhaps towards a larger audience. And I also think that when I really began to travel internationally and see what is being done in other places and by artists, and the fact that art is so much larger and more expansive than what we're exposed to here in our locality, that those two for me were, and that would be something that I would definitely recommend to younger people. Also, whatever does get to the top is good. Mm-hmm. So if you do go to the Venice Biennale or go to the Tate or to the Museum of Modern Art what you see there has been chosen by such seasoned eyes that it sort of holds a power that is better tuned to be able to reach the audience that artist wants to be able to reach. So I think that there is a lot to be said for quality. I think that what constitutes quality is very nebulous. Maybe that's where the difficulty lies. Although I think that once something is made, as an artist, you know whether or not it's gotten to where it should have gotten to, or whether it hasn't. And then I think once it's recognized in a greater world, in the art world, that helps to make it grow.
That's true.
So that just as with anything that involves a kind of talent, it's important to work on it, really important to work on it. By the same fact, there is the possibility for giftedness to rise. I'd just like to say something else, and that is that one of the things with traveling and being able to, or having exhibition opportunities, that I would like to be able to keep on sharing those. And in fact, it means that when traveling or when in those exhibition opportunities, I have in my mind the sense that I want to somehow or other bring this back to where I am from, to here in Vernon. So this is the reason why we've been doing the magazines, for instance. So each time we have a major trip away, we are very conscious of recording what it is that we see when we're away, and then doing a magazine when we come back that we can share with the community, which we do, you know, backsheesh, just give it out to the artist friends that we know and everything else, in order, and then at the same time we send that magazine back again to all of the institutions that we were in, saying, look, we've covered this particular institution, and then that institution has a little hint of something that's been happening here in Vernon. I was incredibly impressed with Noah's take on Europe, on him for his first time of being in Europe, and the fact that he was this very, very convinced artist and convincing artist from the beginning, and then he went to Europe and he saw what was being done and he loved it. You know, it's that sense of historicity, which we don't have here as a culture. That
It's true.
We don't have the old museums and the old, you know, that sense of historicity. So, and it's inspiring. Being a female and the role of a female being important in terms of what the message is, if there is a message. I know what the inspiration is. The inspiration is to come up with a totally new visual that hasn't been experienced before. It can be through whatever medium it is, but to come up with that new phenomenal object visual. So that's what putting together the various different things that I use over and over again, the animals, the sort of references to spirituality, the contemporary popness of it. I think that it's all about trying to find that absolutely new image. And what inspires me a lot are old collections, are museums, because I quite often start drawing in the museum and then bringing home that's what all of the black pieces are generally, having been drawing it right there in front of the piece, and then coming back to the studio and turning it into something else. This is gouache and oil stick.
Okay.
Yeah. We like to play chess. So there's the the chess players. These were from Bali two objects in Bali that I collected when I was there with my children after our house burnt down. And here is this is the urn that has my mother's ashes in it. This one has my father's ashes in it. So you can see that there's it's sort of a back narrative to it, but it doesn't really make any visual sense other than this combination of events becomes very unusual. And therefore it's putting together of areas of paint and objects that otherwise wouldn't be put together in this way. And so it makes a
But it doesn't need to have the story to be mesmerizing.
No,
and
it
to,
can
like,
just
keep your eye moving and captivated.
but it does need the story in order to have something different happen instead of something that might be very sort of rigid and ordinarily planned. Well, this space in this wall when we were living in New York, it was my practice every Sunday to go to the Metropolitan Museum with drawing materials and draw. And then during the week at the studio, I would use that which I collected to work on larger pieces. And within the Far Eastern collection, and because of my background with Buddhism, they had a really big mural just as you come into the Far Eastern collection. So I wanted my studio to have a wall that would be so big that I could put that really big, do that really big piece on it. But I actually started one in sections, but the sections other people got the sections before I got the whole thing done. But the scrolls have really been a good way for me of being able to cover a lot of area, have an impression with something that we can literally carry 8-10 scrolls as we did down to Brazil in a golf bag.
Yeah,
so it can,
brilliant.
yeah.
Our time with Julie was truly inspiring. The clarity in which she sees her purpose and embraces community shows younger generations that anything is possible as a maker if you believe in yourself and do the work. Thank you for joining us for this segment of The Makers.